All right, hi, and welcome back. Here we are revolutionizing news with your non-party affiliated host and our three different political parties today to provide you, the guest, the viewer, with an open platform of discussion. Help us grow by smashing the thumbs up button right now. Join the movement, hit the subscribe button, and if you want to participate, put your answers to the topic questions in the comments below. Now let's hear from our guests, and we're going to start with Kyle. The Biden administration, Kyle, proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, which appears poised to narrowly pass through Congress. This includes $1,400 stimulus checks, $350 billion state and local government bailout, $400 per week in federal unemployment for unemployed workers, a $15 an hour minimum wage, as well as food and rental assistance for people impacted by the pandemic. So, Kyle, should the Congress pass this legislation, and do they need to do so in a bipartisan manner for it to seem legitimate?
I think if they could do a bipartisan manner, that would help. First of all, does anybody know the $15 minimum wage? I thought that was for federal workers only. Is that correct? I got a yes. Okay, great. So, that's not, I don't think that's going to be the end of the world to mandate a minimum wage for federal workers. Although, it's never good to have a minimum wage, obviously. But a lot of this money is going $1.9 million or $1 trillion. A lot of it's government spending. So a lot of it's going to be misallocated. It's going to be, a lot of it's going to be wasted. A lot of it's going to go to people who don't need help and the people who do need help a lot of times don't see those dollars. So I would argue that, the government kind of got us in this situation in the first place, I think, by their over pandemic response. They've destroyed small businesses. They've hurt the economy. So here we are. The government has broken our legs, and this is their way of handing us a crutch. They're going to give us some money back. So we're going to take the crutch, and I think hopefully some of this money will get into the hands of people who need it.
Rocco, getting to the question itself, should Congress pass this legislation? Are they going to pass it? Do they need to do so in a bipartisan manner for it to seem legitimate, or are they just going to steamroll it right through?
Well, to me, whether or not it's bipartisan honestly is immaterial. I don't think that it matters at all. To me, Congress should absolutely reject another stimulus bill, a bill which will lead to a situation where the federal government has spent $5 trillion over the course of just a year of the COVID pandemic. And this has led to a situation, this spending, where America can continue to mortgage the future of our children and grandchildren in order to continue to deny the reality of mitigation efforts, deny the reality of the impacts of mental health and physical health that this lockdown, these masks, all these mitigation efforts have, to deny the economic devastation that's going on around us, and to try to put everyone in a state of perpetual house arrest, all funded by these trillions of dollars. It's ridiculous. More federal unemployment means more lockdowns. A state and local government bailout means more lockdowns. This is only going to aid in enabling the continuation of programs which fundamentally led to our economic and social malaise. Furthermore, it is utterly immoral to force states who did the right thing, like Florida, Georgia, and South Dakota, to pay for states like New York and California, states who devastated their economies and got absolutely zero COVID mitigation benefit for that devastation. And to be clear, New York and California are in fourth place and first place in total cases, and in first place and second place in total deaths. Now, obviously, those are larger states, but those are still, per capita, when compared to states like Texas and Florida, much worse. And when you compare Cuomo and Gavin Newsom to governors like Christie Noem, governors like Ron DeSantis, they now want to pass the buck of the cost of their failed leadership onto the governors who did the right thing, who are back to normal, who have their economies either largely or completely back on track. That is immoral, it's reprehensible, and as a New Yorker, I am appalled at the notion that the people who did the right thing should pay for the mess that my governor created here in my state. Instead of another bailout, Biden should encourage people to open up right away and stop being irrational about a virus with a 0.26% death rate.
Rocco, to that point though, I just want to get more out of you for the viewer. So there's a couple of different points in here: the $1,400 stimulus check, the $15 an hour minimum wage, the $400 a week in federal unemployment assistance. Are any of those points within this bill? And I know that there's a lot more with the state bailouts and whatnot, and the COVID assistance. Are there any of those points that you and the Republican Party do agree with?
I mean, I can't speak for the Republican Party as a whole. It's for the conservative wing of the Republican Party. Absolutely not. This spending is all unconstitutional. It's all reckless. It all should have ended. The biggest failure of the Trump administration, to be quite frank, was the insane spending, the indefensible level of spending that went on during the Trump administration. And that includes and is especially, evident during the pandemic. And this massive $1.9 trillion bill is just another continuation of that, and shows that Joe Biden is not going to resolve this problem, that is going to continue to build, and which is going to harm our children and grandchildren irreparably if we don't stop.
I'm sure the guests and the viewers want to hear your response, David, to Kyle and Rocco. They're definitely teaming for it, but I want your answer or your response to the question first, and then we'll let you guys go back around and the audience can hear your responses. So, David, should Congress pass this legislation, and do they need to do it in a bipartisan manner for it to seem legitimate?
They absolutely have to pass this legislation, 100%. The most legitimate thing, the most real thing that's out there is the suffering of the American people. And this is absolutely necessary in order to try and help mitigate that and to help the people who were completely abandoned by their federal government over the basically last year by the Trump administration. Everybody sees how the stock market is going bonkers. They know where those trillions of dollars of the Trump bailouts went. All right. They now need some actual help themselves. And as far as legitimacy, helping people is the legitimate end of the government. All right. So let's go ahead and pass this, and then let's let the people decide who's legitimate and who's not in Congress. All right. The GOP has no legitimate claim to power, not in a democratic society. And so at this point, that's where we should go. If we want to talk about legitimacy, it's let's get the people the help they need. Right. And then let them decide who's legitimate, what was legitimate at the ballot box.
So to your points, though, we've got roughly 78 million Americans who didn't vote for Joe Biden. We have them voting for Donald Trump in the last election. And of those conservatives, this is a big number, $1.9 trillion, David. That's a lot of money. Are any of those points that are brought up in this bill, to the antithesis of the question I asked Rocco, are there any of those that you disagree with? Do you disagree with the $1,400 stimulus check, the $400 a week in federal unemployment, the $15 an hour minimum wage, the $350 billion state and local government bailouts? Do you disagree with any parts of that particular stimulus package right now?
Yes. The check should be $2,000, and it should be monthly until the economy is recovered. We need to get aid to real people, the people of this country who have been paying taxes. And, we hear talk like first the misinformation. It's like saying that the fatality rate is, around 0.25%. It's like, that's just a lie. Okay. And we need to stop with the misinformation. Everybody out there, it's people weren't staying home from businesses, and businesses weren't slowing down just because, there was some sort of shutdown. Okay. People were terrified of dying. People didn't want to get their relatives sick. All right. And with where we're at right now, it's like, as far as your question about, Trump and people who supported Trump in this last election, obviously anybody who would vote for Trump doesn't care about the deficit or the debt. They're just using it as a hypocritical talking point to bring up now because he jumped in and ran it through the roof, giving trillions of dollars of tax cuts to people who just don't need it. All right. Bankrupting the government, shifting debt burdens onto future generations, and also torching the planet. So if you want to, cry for future generations, let's talk about the party that's actually set them up for complete failure and for a dystopian future. Okay. Number one, the Republican Party. Right. And so let's have an honest discussion about this if we can, but that's going to involve cutting through misinformation and holding people to their past votes and what they have supported.
This is the part that all of our viewers have been waiting for. Our responses. Kyle, your last minute from the Libertarian parties in your response to David and Rocco. Go ahead.
So both the Republicans and Democrats, I agree with David. They're awful. They're both horrible on debts and deficits. They both overspend. And remember, if you just would keep that money in people's hands in the first place, it's sad that people are crying for government for money. If the government didn't take all that money in the first place, which every time they take a dollar, they have to waste part of that dollar. If they would have just left that money in people's hands in the first place, they would have more money to handle these responses. And it's not government's responsibility to protect anybody. It's government's responsibility. If you want to have a government, their responsibility is to protect freedom. And by protecting freedom, we can protect each other. We can talk to each other. We can persuade each other. And there's so many tools, just of freedom. If you think something is important, you have the freedom of speech and the freedom of ownership of your property, that you can use all these tools to get to push against the world and say, look, this is what I think. I think this is important. And
I understand your point, Kyle. I understand your point of freedom, right? So in 20 seconds, if I can get your response to this, I mean, let's look at the reality. I mean, the reality is, let's take a location, let's say Anaheim, for example, Anaheim, California. There's a massive spike right now in COVID. And we all understand that. We all get the data, and David, I'm sure, would provide us with that. But that particular subset category, the people that live there are primarily hospitality based. People that, they're waiters, they're servers, their family is dependent on people traveling to Anaheim, to Disneyland, to enjoy those attractions. They may have a family of a father and of a husband and a wife who are out of work because of this pandemic right now. So you're saying people can live off of their freedoms. If there's no work in one restaurant to another restaurant to another restaurant, in their field, in their industry, what is somebody like that to do if they don't have the extra unemployment benefits coming in, if they don't have the extra stimulus money coming in? What is your response to that?
So it's the insanity that says that you have to force somebody, that if somebody's out drowning in the ocean, that the only way any bystanders would go out and help that person back to shore is if somebody on a horse comes up with a gun and says, go out there and help somebody. You don't need that. If you are not free to sin, you're not free to be virtuous. We need to ask the people, and they're out of their virtuosity, to help when people are down and out. But my guess is if you let people keep their own stuff, keep their own work, they'll have plenty of money and plenty of resources when times are rough.
Rocco, with your last minute, this is the part that everybody's been waiting for. Your response to Kyle and David, please.
So I think that there's just a couple of points here to bring up. The first one is that on the point of the debt and the deficits and the fact that we spent $5 trillion here, the first point to bring up is that just because Donald Trump did something that was bad does not mean that the policy itself of accumulating debt is not a bad thing. And it is not an argument against the notion that having these massive deficits is a bad thing to say that, well, Donald Trump did it, so therefore you don't care about the debt if you claim that this is a problem and you voted for Donald Trump. The fact of the matter is that there is bad and there is also worse. I mean, David just said that he advocates for having perpetual monthly, I'm assuming $2,000 checks until the end of the pandemic. And if you have 100 million households taking that, that's $200 billion a month for the duration of the pandemic, as long as this goes on. So to say that these sides are equal on the pandemic or equal on spending is just absurd in my view. I just want to say another point of fact, because David challenged the factuality of the 0.26% death number. In May, the CDC published a document titled Pandemic Planning Scenarios, with estimates about the virus to help modelers and public health officials. And this had a range of estimates from between 0.2 to 1% for symptomatic infection, with the best estimate for symptomatic fatality at 0.4%, but also placed the best estimate of people who show asymptomatic transmission at 35%, placing the total at 0.26%. This is in a USA Today article, June 5th, 2020. I invite people to look it up.
David, round us out with your last minute to respond to Kyle and Rocco.
Regarding the statistics, people should look it up. I haven't seen what Rocco's referencing, but 1% has been consistent across everything. And if we were dealing with, basically 0.25%, we would have 400 times the current infection rate would have been already infected in the country. The current death rate. So since we're over 400,000, 400 times that, we'd be at 160 million Americans would have already had COVID in order to get to the death rate that we're currently at. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because then we'd already be at herd immunity or damn close, right? But more importantly, regarding all of this, people are hurting. All right. The entire point of government is to be able to help people. Kyle's going to talk about, oh, we need private citizens to do it. Guess what? They are doing it. Right. But the only organization that has enough power to do this, right? Bezos isn't opening up his wallet and helping people out. He has all the money anybody would need to. Right. But the government is the only one that can do it. The federal government's the only one that can go into debt and can print their own money. That's why they need to help the local governments. And throwing back to an earlier point by Rocco, where it's not just bailing out states like California and New York, which have been hit hardest by this despite their best efforts, right? California and New York pay more taxes. So Rocco, you've been paying more taxes. I've been paying more taxes. And our taxes go to help our fellow Americans in other states. Okay, they get disproportionately taken out of our states and go to those other places. And I'm fine with that because I want to live in a country that is a civilized society where we help each other deal with conditions that are outside of our control, and we band together and help those less fortunate when disasters like this one strike, when once in a century disasters hit.
I want to round out just quickly by saying that this is the way that if you want to discuss politics, we all may have different views. So you, the viewer, if there's somebody out there that you want to discuss politics with, sit down, have a civil conversation. This is definitely the way that we want to present that you should be able to do it. Listen to the other side, respond to them. Behind the scenes, we may talk politics right here, but we're all friends and we all have our own mutual feelings for each other. So we appreciate you, the viewer, coming out today. If you liked everything, hit the like button. If you want to, hit that subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.